Is Sheila not coming today?
She will come for the special meeting.
Oh,
She
okay.
has some guests over, so. Good afternoon. The time is now 4:01 p.m. The Wayzata Public Schools Board of Education work session for Monday, June 23rd, 2025 will please come to order. We'll start with introductions beginning from my right.
Heidi Cater,
Dan Ginestra.
Paris Bende.
Sarah Johansson.
Chase Anderson.
And I am Milind Sohoni. Thank you, everyone, and welcome. As a reminder, the board does not vote on any item at the work session. This afternoon, we have 3 items on the agenda, 1 teaching and learning report and 2 financial and operations reports. So let's begin. First, we have a teaching and learning report. Executive Director Dana Miller will do the introductions.
Good evening, members of the board. Dr. Anderson. We are here tonight to do our annual QComp presentation, which is mandated by the state as part of that compensation. And so with me tonight, I have 3 of our peer coaches. I'll let them introduce themselves, but they're going to take you through the work of peer coaching and the successes and growth we've had in that program, and then we'll be happy to answer questions following that as well. So with that, I'll invite them up.
Thank you, Dana. I'm Naomi Langer. I just completed my first year of peer coaching. I was at Wayzata High School and Northwoods Elementary.
I'm Madeline Ray. This was my first year as a peer coach as well, and I was at Wayzata High School and Wayzata Early Learning School.
And I'm Alicia Pierscala. I previously taught at the high school teaching math, and then this is my second year of peer coaching. I'm at Greenwood and West Middle School. Okay, we're a little bit going to treat you like students today in an attempt to not speak 30 minutes. So we would love if one of you would volunteer and just read the peer coaching mission statement as kind of a mutual understanding of what it is that we're doing together.
I'll do it. I love this. I love getting treated like a student.
Thanks, Heidi.
Peer coaching mission statement: to cultivate a culture of continuous self-directed learning and growth among our staff through a coaching partnership that focuses on reflective conversations rooted in collected data with the ultimate goal of positively impacting student achievement and experience.
Thank you.
Thanks for reading. So at the end of the school year, we give all of the staff in the district a survey to anonymously share out their experiences in the peer coaching year. So these are 4 of the questions and categories, and it is a lot of reading, so I'd love to read it to you. But highlighted in the yellow there is our new numbers for this year, and we're so excited to get to report to you that each of those question categories have seen growth. And the most significant growth is in that last question, which asks, working with my peer coach has positively impacted students. So that one we were excited to see like a 5% growth. Just some of the other things that staff have also, 90% or more of staff have said is that I value the choices I have in peer coaching to choose my own professional development. And my peer coach provides data that helps me reflect on my teaching practice or professional practice. And as a result of peer coaching, I've tried something new.
So, Heidi, I'm glad you said you want to be treated like a student, and I hope the rest of you do as well, because we are going to engage in a culturally responsive protocol. This is sociocentric and autonomous. So first we are going to do something on your own, and then you'll be able to share with a partner next to you. That is the sociocentric part. You will be able to stay seated. This is a more stationary activity. So I am going to show you the program shift highlights that our peer coaching program has done this year. There are 5 bullets that I'm going to ask you to read. That's the examine the image or text closely. I want you to ask yourself, what do you notice? Then I know that you have your agenda in front of you. So if you would flip that over and use the back side in order to save some trees. Write down what are you wondering about based on those program shift steps that you see. And then after a couple of moments of you pondering, you'll be able to share some of your predictions with the people next to you. So maybe we can have partners, partners, and partners once we show this. So here are our program shift highlights. The directions are up in the upper right corner. Your job is to read those 5 bullet points. Think about what you notice and what are you predicting? What are you wondering? What are we going to talk about after this? If you haven't moved on to the what do I wonder part yet, go ahead and start some writing. And if you're ready, you can share with your partner. Go ahead and finish up your thought. It's a good timer. We did vet that to make sure it was a good one. Thank you for engaging in that protocol. That's one that we might use with our students at the beginning of a unit and get them to build off of what connections they're starting to make. So thank you for doing that. Madeline is going to talk about the first highlight now.
Sounds great. So the first one we're talking about is embedding CEL coaching techniques. So this year we had the awesome opportunity for the Center of Educational Leadership to come in for some training for leaders across the district. We had principals, coaches, different types of coaches, literacy coaches, peer coaches, instructional coaches, coming together in this learning. And one of the tools that we used for our learning is that inverted pyramid that you see on your screen, with the top being that vision for student experience. So we use this as a tool to help begin to create a collective vision for our student experience. And by aligning that shared vision, we can create those consistent conditions for students to thrive. The second part of that screen has a staircase, which was helpful for peer coaches as we worked through helping teachers with seeing that vision for the student experience. So when we went in to have coaching conversations, we learned that it was really important to help teachers understand what their current state was in their classroom and also what they needed their ideal state to be for student success. And as coaches, what we learned during that CEL learning, or part of what we learned, were questions that we could ask our teachers, reflective questions, to help them understand what their next actionable step might be. So when they understood the current state, we could think about what they were on the verge of, or what that next action step would be to help them ultimately get to that vision for student experience, that success that they're looking for, the ideal state. So that was part of what we were working on. We had those conversations with teachers during goal setting meetings, planning meetings around lessons, debrief meetings after they were done teaching their lessons. And again, just asking those questions that were reflective, but also helping teachers move to action with their next step. With that survey that Alicia talked about at the start, we also had some open-ended feedback from teachers. And these were just 3 verbatims that we got back from teachers that kind of reflected that CEL work that we worked on this year. So with that, is there anyone that would be willing to read the first verbatim from one of our teachers?
Do it. I think about where my current state is and a next step I hope to take to grow.
Awesome. Is there somebody that would be willing to share the second one?
I can read the next one. Have productive conversations that include reflection as well as proactive steps to move forward.
Thank you. And then our last one.
Reflect upon instructions to informatively guide my next steps with the whole group, small group, and individual students.
Thank you.
Another thing we worked on this year as peer coaches was continuing what we've built upon in past years, which is kind of deepening and developing the sense of goal setting. That goal setting is not just for my personal classroom, but the goals that staff are setting are connected to what they're doing within their work with their PLC, and they're connected to the academic and student achievement goals that the buildings in the district have set. So a lot of our conversations at the beginning of the year or even throughout the middle of the year are kind of focusing on just making connections for staff. So if they're saying something, we highlight for them, oh, and that aligns with your SMART goal, or that aligns with the building district goal, building those connections. And then while we were having our, no, I'm not done, you get to keep going. While we continued those coaching conversations for the year, we use those goals to help people have their 2 coaching cycles where we collect data with them, connected to, as best as we could, to their specific goal or a building goal, and using that data to help them reach their goals that they had for the year around student success. And one of the things that we're hoping for in going into the future is kind of continuing this transition between a SMART goal and something called a CI goal, or a collaborative inquiry goal. You might be very familiar with SMART goals. It just stands for like a specific measurable goal with a time limit on it. And some of the buildings in our district are switching to something called a collaborative inquiry question. It's still goal setting, but instead the collaborative inquiry question starts with the adult's action. So it's, how will my teaching choice of blah, blah, blah impact the students' achievement and experience? So it's not just here's the goal I want for my students, but it's how does my choice impact them? And we're hoping to be able to use that more district-wide a little bit in future years. Okay, 2 more verbatims from our peer coach survey, so that you don't have to read these longer ones out loud. I'm going to ask that you can read the 2 quotes in your head, and then we're going to have you share out just one word that stands out to you from the responses. Okay, so just take a minute. Is there one word that stands out to you in your? You have one to share, or should we go down the line? What feels better? Okay.
Either way. You want to start, Dan?
Sure. Group.
Mine is a couple of words, the right next step.
For me, constant evaluation stuck out.
Collaboration.
I also picked taking the right next step.
Collaboration was my word.
Yeah. Good. It's not a bad thing to have collective opinion on the words, keywords that are important.
Actually, it's nicely into our next
Into our
highlight.
yes, it does. So another shift that we have made is more collaboration. This is a quote from the survey. I see value in pairing peer coaching, literacy coaching, and family partnership leads in the buildings where they exist. The work has overlap. Hearing ideas multiple times helps to cement learning and is very powerful. Literacy coaches in the elementary buildings helped support PLCs in essential standards work. Each team identified an essential standard for literacy that they would focus on, not leaving everything else behind, but that was their main target. Then we came in as peer coaches to help them write their SMART goal around that essential standard, as well as figured out ways to collect data for them to show their growth. Then we could also engage in those coaching cycles with the staff and the support from the literacy coaches to examine and improve their instructional practice, see what tweaks they needed to make in order to make more student growth.
I don't think I'm in charge of this, but
Okay.
she's looking at me like I am.
The family partner, did you have
I didn't know I signed up for this, but apparently I did. So, what can I tell you about family partnership leads off the top of my head? I personally got to work with family partnership leads at the middle school level and also at the elementary school level. And I know that there are particular staff who appreciated partnering with them in the terms of coming into their classroom for some support or some co-teaching and idea sharing. And the family partnership leads have connected with the peer coaching because it was another aspect for staff to, what's the words I'm looking for? To get some information, some data around their classroom in ways that they're working with supporting each and every one of their students.
And the last one up there is our built teams. So this year, peer coaches were a big part of the beginning of the year before school started, meeting with builts. And then also throughout the year, we had peer coaches attending meetings as well, just to help align building priorities with our coaching conversations that we were having. And then our next highlight here is supporting staff with district initiatives. So the first one is the culturally responsive protocols, which Naomi has done one with you already today. So these are just protocols that help our teachers meet students' needs in the classroom. And some ways as coaches that we support that are helping teachers try new protocols in their classroom with the ultimate goal of encouraging them to have a big toolkit of different protocols that they can reach for, and intentionally choosing those protocols to fit what's needed in the classroom at that time or what students need to thrive in their environment.
Anything about basic needs? Is that me? Really? Okay. Apparently, I'm also talking about the basic needs. This is most highly seen in our elementary schools, but the focus is that this is not something that's only for young children, and the district has been spreading the power of basic needs all the way through the middle schools and high schools. And it is visuals and language to help staff and students recognize that the choices we're making have a reason, right? If I am doing something in my, if a student does something in my classroom, I'm going to instantly think, okay, what is it that they're trying to meet here? Are they trying to just have more fun? Are they trying to have more success? Are they really seeking a connection? And then staff are using these protocols, these instructional strategies, basically, support kids in reaching their need for belonging and their need for success in the classroom.
And another district initiative is the Portrait of the Wayzata Graduate at the high school. However, I was at Meadow Ridge the last week of school, and I saw a poster there too, which is really cool that there's that connection from the elementary all the way to the high school. But personally, I worked with several teams at Wayzata High School where they were using the portrait as part of their collaborative inquiry question as a way to really notice and evaluate if they are using explicit language around the portrait in order to make students recognize when they are using those traits and how they will become future leaders in our communities or others.
Okay. As peer coaches, we are also teachers, and just like teachers have to, or staff have to create a SMART goal or a collaborative inquiry question, we do as well as a team. And so our goal this year was a question looking for what is our action and how is it impacting staff and students. So we asked, how will increasing my use of intentional coaching questions during coaching conversations impact a change in staff practice and mindset? So like someone had mentioned earlier, we have all been trained in something called cognitive coaching, which is how we interact with staff and the questions we ask to help them reflect on their experiences. And this year we also included and incorporated that with the CEL type of questioning. And we saw a lot of overlap and connections between those. And so we wanted to know, how does having a new toolbox of questions help us in our coaching practice? So we just wanted to kind of highlight some of the things that we looked for as we were looking for impact on staff and students. So one thing we do is we look for visuals from the people we're connecting with and talking with as partnerships. So visuals like looking up and away, pauses in their thinking, people even saying, oh, that's a good question, or I haven't really thought about that, where they indicate that, oh, I am making an impact in supporting you and growing as an educator. And then we look for questions that can impact their efficacy, their ownership of what they can control in their classroom, questions that help them develop their craft. What can they tweak and adjust and change? How can we call them to action and be flexible in the moment when things don't go as planned? So we plan out these types of questions and roll with them during the conversations. And we have found this year that there was a lot of impact in questions where we were discussing with staff, how does that compare to? So perhaps like, what did you do in the past when this happened? Or based on last year, what is something that you want? So kind of a compare to the past and then just things that are a personal focus. So for example, they have a lesson going or they're planning a lesson and then asking a question along the lines of like, and what is it that you need to be intentional about that's going to make this a successful lesson? So focusing on what the teacher can do and not just, well, how did my students do?
Mm-hmm. And some quotes from our survey that kind of went with that. Peer coaching allows me to think about where things could be better for my students and their ability to reach the learning goals. My peer coach also challenges me to consider what my students need me to get better at and why, putting that ownership on the teacher, to be open about trying new ideas in the classroom and reflect on what worked and what did not work. I felt safe to take a risk and try something new. And peer coaching allows me to reflect on best practices, have the time and space to talk through new ideas, and really dive into what I want to improve in my classroom with my particular set of students and their diverse needs.
So just as we are helping teachers identify their next actionable step, as peer coaches, we identified some of our own. And one that I'm most excited about moving forward is embedded CEL into cognitive coaching. So as a first year coach this year, I was trained in cognitive coaching, which is the foundational framework of reflective conversations with teachers. And the CEL layered on top of that, as I talked about, with helping teachers or asking teachers questions that help them reflect on their current state, ideal state, and what that next actionable step is. So I'm excited to continue to bring those two things together and help teachers keep moving forward in their classrooms to that ideal state.
And I am really excited to continue to strengthen collaboration with the varied roles that we work with, whether that's our literacy coach, a family partnership lead, or within the built teams.
And for me, my goal for next year, or something I'm looking forward to, is expanding that collaborative inquiry question idea instead of a SMART goal. Moving from just a goal to a framework where it's what is my action, and then how does that get me to my goal and my impact.
So we have one final protocol for you to engage in, and this one is stationary. You get to stay put, and it is on your own, so it is a reflection process. So on the back of your agenda, if you have some space still, draw a picture of what you heard or learned, then add a speech or thought bubble to it. Write one word that is a reflection of today's learning. And then when you're done with that, if you would like to and you feel comfortable, you can share it with somebody next to you. I'll just give you about a minute and then we will wrap it up.
Well, thank you guys for listening to us today and for engaging in our activities. You may not notice, but I want you to feel what you're doing now. Like you're smiling and you were turning and talking and laughing and sharing what you learned. And it's just the magic of a specific activity and how that can impact your classroom and adults alike, right? Not instead of just listening to someone talk at you. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And do you have any questions for us that you want to share or ask for the group?
Probably
I'm
we
just
will.
gonna-
Thank you all. And Dana, you have something to say?
Yeah, Director Sonia, if you just allow me a moment, I just want to thank the folks you're seeing there on the board today, both full-time peer coaches in those roles, and then because of the need as we continue to grow, and as a way to stay really connected to the classroom, you'll also see several of our teaching and learning instructional coordinators that also participate in peer coaching. Not only does it slightly help lower our caseloads, which are kind of high in peer coaching, but it, again, just really allows them to be deeply embedded in that work. And so we will be continuing that for this upcoming year as well. And we had such positive feedback both from our coaches and from teachers around the CEL work. And that really is a shift with the collaborative inquiry question, taking it from maybe a little bit more of the how are you feeling and let me be a guide by your side, to really helping teachers dig into what is it you want to change about your teaching, and then how can we help you in some real good questions to get them to dig deeper in their learning rather than just this kind of more of a shallow. It feels like we're going much deeper. And as you'll always hear us say, our most valuable resource if we want to impact student achievement are the teachers in the classroom. And so that's where our investment should be going. And so I would be not holding true to me and our role if I didn't say we were lucky this 2 years with the state level and continuing the Q compensation, at to our schools, and that will be something we will want to watch closely in the upcoming years. In talking to leaders in other school districts, they do not have the depth and richness of our model and our peer coaching that we do here, and just really making sure we're clear that if we're not investing in our teachers, we are drastically impacting student achievement. So both these folks in the program building better teachers and taking all this vast training that they're having back to the classroom. It's just a beautiful model of coaching. And again, I want to thank them for taking that risk and taking on the task. So with that, we will take some questions.
All right, thank you all. Any question? Yeah.
Yeah, a couple of questions. So the slide where all the percentages were there, so is it everybody who was surveyed or only certain teachers? What was the sampling size?
It's a great question. The survey goes out to the entire staff, district-wide. That being said, not every staff member fills out the survey by their own personal choice.
Okay. And then usually when you talk to kids, right, there is always that comparison. So someone will say, oh, ABC does XYZ in one class. I wish I were in that class, right? So my question is, as you look at peer coaching and obviously working with individual teachers, how do you do kind of knowledge sharing within the building across different classes or even across different buildings? Do you try to use best practices, or really the goal is, hey, I want to focus on one teacher, one class, and see how we get to the outcome of that class? Or how do you sort of take that knowledge and apply it to other buildings or other classes?
This might not exactly answer specifically your question. However, the way that some teams work together is really interesting, especially at the elementary level. Several PLCs will do their observation cycle as a team. They'll have a collective goal and either do a pre-observation meeting together where we plan for it and then do the observation individually in each classroom. And then you could either reflect together as a team or reflect individually. So some people do choose to do that. Some people do choose to do their observation cycle individually as well, but that's just one part of it. Anything else?
I think another great thing is, as peer coaches, we get to visit lots of different classrooms. And when teachers come to us and identify an ideal state that they're working towards, we have, most certainly seen teachers doing really amazing things. So we can recommend, for one of their peer coaching cycles, going in and, hey, sharing stories, I think is really powerful for peer coaching with other teachers. So they know that there's really great things happening in other classrooms, and we kind of have some information of who those people are that they could go visit.
No, that's great. And again, I know the overall experience is great, but again, we didn't want one class, one building to be different experience than others. So no, thank you. That's helpful.
Yeah, Dan.
So if you wouldn't mind going back a few slides to where that stairs were.
The staircase?
Yeah. Forward one.
There.
Excellent. So I noticed how you've added small triangles in there to make the step ups a little bit less. So could you give an example of kind of the actual application of those little triangles, an example of what making that step up a little bit less so would look like?
That visual is from CEL, from the Coaches Leadership Academy, or from all of CEL actually. So I don't know that that's their visual. So I don't know that we necessarily know if it was just aesthetically or if there's actually a point to those little triangles. The nice thing about both of these is this is the work that we've been doing as a district, we've been doing with principals, we were doing with teachers. And so it's to really emphasize the fact that sometimes when we talk about getting to a space, we get lost. And you do this personally. So, you set a goal for yourself and you can get lost in where I want to get. And the idea here is to build actionable steps. And it doesn't mean that you're going to get from the current to the ideal in 1 year. It may take. So we have a goal around our peer coach model that we had at a current state, and we've taken a couple actionable steps. Or So I think the intention is just more to show that you're making progress incrementally, and as long as you're continuing to move up towards that ideal state, that's a success, rather than waiting until you've hit that final goal to measure that success.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you for joining us tonight and for all, or today, whatever afternoon, and for all of your work. One of the things that just stands out to me, so I guess I don't have a specific question, but maybe my question is, am I thinking about this right? There are multiple spots in this presentation when you talk about your work where you're really intentionally looking at the systems perspective and the teacher as a person, the teacher as a community, and then the teacher in the environment. And so I think about even the pairing of the peer coach and the literacy coach and the family partnership leads, right? Like really thinking about that individual need, the school need, and then the entire system. Is that a right way to, or an on-track way of thinking about what you're doing? And it sounds like you're feeling like you're seeing some progress in that work.
Yeah, specifically in my situation, I was at Northwoods Elementary, and I worked really closely with Hillary Farrington, who was the literacy coach there. We shared an office space, and so when we were both there, we were able to collaborate like in the moment. Hey, I noticed this. Have you seen something like that? And not necessarily even using specific teacher names to save confidentiality. However, we can say like, these are some trends that I'm noticing. What might you try with this? What could I recommend? And that's just one specific way, but that's what a lot of the peer coaches are doing with their partnerships.
Yeah, I do.
So I'm going to add on to Sarah's systems thinking, because also that was something I really noticed. You're looking at the entire system, and you're looking at an entire student, and you're trying to shift the system to continue with them as you're talking about not just the goal, but an entire framework so that it can carry over in multiple ways. I noticed that, or it kind of brought to my mind that in early learning, we're actually working towards being ready for the student. And I feel like this is kind of the same, I don't know, it has the same feel to it, where we're thinking about what can the teacher do, rather putting onus on the student alone, but what can the teacher do to make sure that we're delivering what each and every student needs. So I really appreciate that ability to give ways for teachers to individualize, because I think it's a nice tagline, but it's very, very difficult to reach, right? So thank you for finding those ways. My question is going to be around two things. One, how can we continue to support this work? And two, as you're looking at growth, right, because each student only gets one opportunity at second grade or one opportunity at fourth grade, are you feeling that or are you seeing real growth in our students within the year because of the coaching that's happening?
That's a great question.
I'm going to say yes.
Yeah.
We see growth in the students. And we'd love to have a specific things that we can claim are our evidence of how we have impacted that growth. But all we have is verbatims from a survey. We can't assume that the students' reading skills are based on something that we did with a teacher. However, we would love to assume that. But staff regularly are telling us, at the beginning of the year, this is what it was like. And now I just can't believe, like, this is where we are. And some of it is behavioral. A lot of it is reading based at the elementary level. I'm sure you guys have examples from the high school as well.
But we'll hear things like, because I tried something that you encouraged or you asked me to reflect on, I was able to change my practice, which then impacted the students.
And as peer coaches, we have 2 coaching cycles. So we have our first cycle and our second, and a lot of teachers will take something that they, like, that little actionable step that they did in their first cycle, and they'll grow it in their second cycle, which feels great. And sometimes, I haven't been here multiple years yet, but I've heard from other people that it's good to know what they did last year because they also want to continue that growth of whatever their goal was that they were working towards. So I think that says a lot too.
And I think if we go back to what we know about research, right, that the single most important factor, teacher, and that collective efficacy of them believing they're making a difference. So if we want to increase our student achievement, if we want to close our gaps for all students, we have to have teachers that believe that the work they're doing is making a difference. And we have to have them believe they have enough tools in their toolbox to make that difference. So we are definitely seeing an increased use of the culturally responsive protocols, right? As a way to break up the lesson, as a way to get at different students' learning style. I think it was you, Heidi, say, I don't draw. Great. How did you reflect on that learning, right, in a different way? And so you've had the math folks here and doing their living math on the whiteboards, if you will. Those are all things that our peer coaches then are able to support. So teachers are building that confidence in the work they're doing. They don't feel alone. They know that there's somebody they can go to and ask. And our peer coaches don't feel alone because they know they've got a team of coaches supported by equity and inclusion and teaching and learning collaboratively. That will help them out as well if they're seeing things that they're not doing. So the hard part about education is I can't say that A causes B, right? But we can rely on our research that says what we know. And what we know is teachers are the biggest difference, and collective efficacy is one of our, more than 2 years worth of growth in 1 year. And so how do we invest in that? And we know from Hattie's work that coaching. And so your second part of that question was, how do we continue to support that? We have to be able to explain clearly to those in decision-making roles the importance of a teacher and how teachers grow. And while, for example, we get asked a lot about the READ Act, training was great. It was great training. But if we don't continue to support teachers in that training and we don't have coaches and literacy coaches and those right beside them, it's a class they took. And it will not move beyond that, right? We have to have people hip to hip with our teachers, helping them grow. You do that if you're in the medical field, they're constantly renewing themselves. You do that if you're in, an attorney, you go back. That's what makes teaching an art and what makes it professional. And so when we're choosing where to invest our money in education, we need to use the data and invest in the right spaces, and that's our teachers. And that's giving them the support and tools they need. And so we have to continue. When I hear QComp being referred to as evaluation at the state level, and schools do evaluation without this isn't evaluation. Okay, this is coaching, this is skill building, this is supplying teachers with what they need to be the very best and brightest so that every classroom is equipped with the very best and brightest. And so I'll get off my soapbox now, but clearly very passionate about the role of coaching and the leaps we've made in the last years to help teachers understand that it's about their actions and about that they control the outcome in that classroom, and that's that collective efficacy. So.
All right. Okay, I have a couple of questions. The first one, Amy, can you go back to the slides, the one that has the peer coach collaborative questionnaire or something, the pre and post thing?
Yeah, that was just a graphic. So
Yeah, with the four quadrants, right?
Oh, this one?
Keep going. No,
Nope.
keep
keep going.
going.
This one.
This one, yes. So this is about semantics. I don't know if this is really a good question or not, but why is pre underneath the post?
Oh.
Why did you
Sure. So
put post first and then pre?
Yep. Each coach was key. So the question that our goal was, how does increasing my use of intentional coaching questions during coaching conversations impact the staff? So we have 2 conversations with staff. We have one prior to them doing the lesson observation where we collect data, and one post after the lesson. And so the pre-post just is, when did this particular staff or coach ask these questions? So we all kept track of questions that we asked that we noticed staff have a really specific reaction around. Things like, oh, wow, I never thought of that. Or, oh, that's a hard question. Let me think for a minute. Like or they say, oh, I've never tried that, but I'm thinking now, blah, blah, blah. So we're looking for evidence from them that the question we asked impacted what they're going to do moving forward. And so it could have been in before they taught the lesson or after. Does that answer your question?
Well, and this specific snapshot could have been 2 conversations with completely different people. This image just is part of our tracker that we kept track of. So these were not done like a post first and then a pre. That's just the type of meeting that this came from.
Okay, thank you. Dana, question for you.
Yeah.
You said, and I hope I'm not wrong in hearing this, you said our peer coaching model is one of the best and it's better than most other districts. Can you point out one thing that makes it better than everybody else?
I don't know if one thing that would make it better than everybody else, but I think the focus on blending in the collaborative coaching along with the CEL piece and being very intentional about that and allowing our teams to use the PLC time in many schools and including ones I've been in. It's a standalone. It's not tied to all of the work that we're doing. And so it becomes a checkbox, right? Like I have to meet with my peer coach. I do that so that I get this little bit of stipend at the end of the year. We're trying very hard to help teachers see the interconnectedness, and this is a way to support the professional learning that we're doing across the district, so it's not a one and a done. And when I talk to legislatures, and I have extensively on the subject of, do we keep QComp or don't, what I hear they're hearing from other schools is just that. It's a way to check a box because in order to continue this, there is a state mandate that you have to have a peer evaluation. So this is just checking a peer evaluation box. That is not how we see this work at all. We're very invested into that research that supports coaching. So that's where I see it.
We go over and beyond what is expected, kind of, right?
I think when they first came out with this, and sadly I'm old enough to remember, I was in the teaching staff when they first came out with it. It was developed as a way to close the achievement gap and to better support our teachers. Like many things, I'm not sure it got enough support in implementation across the state, and so it slithered into other things in districts. And I will commend those well before me that had the vision on our peer coaching model to make it a place where teachers took risk and felt like they could do that and continue to grow their craft. And then I would say in the last years, we've just really strengthened that, or maybe we lost track of that a little bit, COVID things. And so we've really tried, that's the collaborative inquiry question, that teachers understand it's their action and that's what the peer coaches are there. And that goal should be about what you're going to do. So I can't speak to whether that's, how it was intended and we're going above and beyond. I think we're probably doing what wasn't intended. It just hasn't happened everywhere would be maybe a safer way.
We are different from others, basically.
Yeah, I really do believe that.
That's fair. Yeah, thank you.
You bet.
Any other questions, comments? If not, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
I'm sorry, what did she say?
We're going to switch the next one.
Okay. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is 1B2, which is the facilities update by Director of Operations, John Deutsch. Bold and Kraus Anderson will make the presentation along with John. Thank you, John.
Sure thing. Chair Sahoni, members of the school board, Dr. Anderson. Tonight, I have with me Sal Bagley from Bold Architects and John Hunick from Kraus Anderson. As you know, they are strategic partners in our facilities planning. So tonight, we are going to go over basically a proposed or potential referendum timeline, just to provide some updates, some clarification, and some context as to things that are moving along. At this point, I'll turn it over to Sal.
Good evening. Thanks for having us. So up on the screen, and I have a paper copy in front of me, is a potential timeline related to process mostly and decision making. What I will say is that there are some dates not shown on this that are more related to the setting of an election and calling the county and things like that. So more like the legal side of going out for a referendum is not truly reflected in this. This is really more about process for determining needs, getting community input and feedback, and then you as a board getting to interact with that. So you can see at the top here, we've got the Facilities Steering Committee, which is an ongoing committee. We typically meet monthly, and they have been having facilities conversations, obviously, for years and years. We've been doing some needs analysis and options exploration for the past few months, as you all have had recent engagement with feeling very full and having to make adjustments and what are we going to do for next year and turning things that aren't classrooms into classrooms, right, as you experience that growth. So we've, throughout that process, have been meeting with department heads and principals. We are also currently updating our capacity study, so working with principals on how they intend to use space for next school year. As you know, you engaged with Morris Leatherman for a more atmospheric climate survey back earlier in the spring. And then you had an update about that survey as well as recent enrollment projections back in May. So you can see here we are coming to June and August. And the intent at this time is to do more plan refinement and kind of prepare for a community task force. And I'll talk a little bit about that afterward. So what we've been working on with Superintendent Anderson is the idea of engaging with the SLT. So you can see we listed on here 5 meetings that we're intending to be invited to and the topics we think we might talk about at those. So you can see the first one is tomorrow and things we might talk about that. I don't think we'll take all of SLT, I should say, maybe, but this is the day and times of them. So we are intending to review enrollment projections along with Jen Welk. And to try to make some decisions around what should we plan around. You've gotten a lot of information around what your growth might look like, and at that paired with capacity of the buildings is kind of an important juxtaposition. We will also review this timeline with them tomorrow in case they aren't as familiar with all of that, and then see if there's any takeaways from that first survey that might shape the work. Then we were thinking at meeting 2, we would start talking about capacity and growth needs and criteria. So as you start to plan around a certain number of middle schoolers or one of the models, we can compare that against, available space on a given property site and things like that. So it's difficult for Walden Crouse Anderson to put budgets to things until we start getting down to this level of detail, and that time has come. Then you can see meetings 3 and 4 are more solutions review and prioritization. There are also some non-directly growth-related needs that we've been talking about too, some more special topics. And then the idea of towards the end of August, preparing a kind of a concept bond scope that could go out for a community survey number 2. Still to be influenced with the task force, but it's a complicated problem. You're a large organization, and so to make that task force work efficient, trying to get all of the background data pulled together for them. Then you can see board work sessions. So here we are this evening reviewing timeline and process, who we intend to engage with. And then haven't picked a date yet, but there's a proposal out that sometime in August, we could come and kind of share all of that background information with you all, right? Kind of in more detail. And then prepare for what should go into that survey number 2, which I believe is intended to go out in September of this year. Then around that same time in August, we would establish the task force. That is at the end of the first page there. I see you scroll down. And really that's the important part about that paired with your surveys is just more community input on the plan. So the intent would be to have a membership that is a good cross-section of the community. You can see listed on here is a few suggestions of who to reach out to, maybe some members from CFAC, members of other advisory committees, leadership or administration across buildings, and that doesn't have to be exhaustive list. And the idea that we would have maybe around 3 meetings with them. Meeting 1 we're thinking would be more background knowledge of challenges and proposed solutions. Then more in meeting 2, they could review the results of that survey and help prioritize a plan, right? What does the community think about those needs? What do they think about the tax impact of those needs? And to help curate that and then really prepare for a recommendation in meeting 3 towards the end of October. Then you can see the community survey shows up there at the top of the next page. Preparation work would happen in August. It's my understanding that they would make the calls in early September and that outcomes would be ready for that task force review in early October. This suggests that we would come back to you all for a more formal recommendation or report in late October, around the end of the task force, and then leave space for more work session time in early November. You can see a couple of things bolded on this back page. So I'll start at the bottom actually. So for an April special election, you have to submit the review and comment to the department head basically on or before November 25th. So the only thing about the November 10th board finalized proposal is that that really allows a couple weeks for the preparation of that review and comment document itself, right? Obviously, you could choose to call a special meeting. Then if you choose to do any surveying during that campaign time, you can see that that would be in February or March. And then I think it's always important for people to remember that early voting is a part of all special elections now. And so there will be people able to make their decision as early as March 2nd. So we just wanted to talk through that. And that's really the intent of the next, gosh, what is that, 10 months or so. Take feedback, take questions, comments. John's here as well.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? Please, you have any comments?
Yeah, maybe I'll just build on that. First of all, Sal, thanks for being here, and John, appreciate all the time and energy. We've been working closely with Wold and KA for 16 years now, at least, I think. And so we've flown a lot of missions together, as we say. And I just really appreciate all the time and effort. I should just indicate that this is all preliminary at the current time. However, time's a clicking, and I know our strategic partners are focusing on us and looking for us to tighten up on timelines, and I really appreciate how you put this together because it makes good sense and kind of breaks it out into, if you think of it all at once, it's like overwhelming. But when you kind of break it into these timelines, I think it can be really helpful. Still kind of overwhelming, but less so than if it feels like you have to get it all done by next Friday. And certainly that's not what we need to do. But there's a lot of work before us, a lot of planning. One of the things that we've done is we're trying to incorporate this work, much like we just heard a report on alignment and streamlining and having all things collaborate and work together. We're trying to consolidate some of the work of our SLT, or the Superintendent's Cabinet Group, we call it SLT, to be able to all work together with Sal and John and some of their team members on alternating meeting dates, which is what you saw through those August meeting time periods. I would imagine we'll want to continue that into the fall and beyond, but we'll see where we end up on the summer. But we just felt that would be a good, efficient way to do that. Most of the people that have been on the facilities committee are all on the SLT also. So we really needed to find some ways to streamline. And I'm also always cognizant about the amount of time we spend in meetings, the number of meetings, and all the to-do lists that come out of all those meetings. We usually leave one meeting and go to the next one, and then our to-do lists continue to grow. So anytime we can find efficiencies that can help us consolidate effort and streamline it, and that all the players are in the same room at the same time, it decreases the need to then have someone go and report back to all those people, because we know some things can get lost in that transition and translation. So anyway, I just really appreciate the work that went into this. And with that, I don't think I have any other comments. I could keep talking probably, but I don't know. I probably get repetitive. So I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you,
Chair.
Yeah. Questions, comments?
Yeah, so one comment and moreover request for the board. So I think there is a work session in August, then there is, if needed session in November, and then we vote November 10th. Just knowing the scope and size of this work, we'll figure out how do we keep the board engaged, or at least, aware, because there are different meetings, different surveys. So again, I think we'll definitely need 2 work sessions, maybe one in August and definitely one before the board approval, or maybe through facility meetings if we can share minutes of the meeting. So again, we'll figure out how to keep rest of the board members engaged. But if not, at least we should have that one work session before the vote so everybody gets an opportunity to review and ask questions.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Paras. Good point. Then, sure.
Thank you for being here and for this process. Something that I noticed that I think is really helpful is in our timeline, demonstrated it as well. We did a lot of, although it felt like little pieces, we did a lot of legwork while students were still in session and while families were engaged. And then what I see happening now is then we're taking all that information that we had when our families were engaged, and we're doing strategy over the summer, and we're really thinking about it and exploring it. And then we have a plan, and then things are going to start flying again in the fall once we see our amazing students in our seat and in their seats and all of that process. And so it really feels to me like, although it's clip, right? It's at a clip, it's working with intention, and it seems really mindful of the availability of time of our administrators, the engagement of our families, and then the importance of getting this done, because we know we need more seats. So thank you.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you so much. It's really been a privilege to sit in on the facilities committee meeting of the board and, talk about all these deadlines and all these items. My question, I think, is what a lot of folks have on their minds right now, which is, really anticipating the incoming enrollment, incoming attendees of our buildings, and then making sure we, meet that need, and so we don't have overcrowding and whatnot. And so if you could kind of just walk through the process of, is there a threshold? Is there a demonstration that has to be made to MDE? Do we have to show a certain number of students forecasted to kind of trigger affirmation on review and comment? Just kind of that progress of proving we have the proper enrollment and attendance.
Sure, I can talk through that. So the review and comments submittal to the Department of Ed has, it actually has 7 sections now. So there's some background information about the district, and as a part of that, you are required to submit enrollment history and enrollment projections. So that will be a part of the submission. I'm not aware of any particular threshold, but they do want to see the data behind your decision making. And then there's a whole section around the process used to arrive at the conclusion, and who was involved. Then you have to talk through specific benefits to students, staff, and the community. You have to address site size and acreage, and if you have enough space. You have to provide enough information around your budgets. So they don't do a ton of diving deep on the budgets, but I would say they know enough to be dangerous in regards to if the budgets look commensurate to the projects proposed. And then there are some commitments that the district has to make in regards to meeting all applicable codes and things of that nature. And we would often attach as appendices to that submission kind of all of the background data. What you're really looking for at the end of the day from the Department of Ed is they'd either deem a plan educationally advisable or educationally inadvisable. So it's not actually a yes or a no. Educationally advisable is what you're going for. If it's deemed not educationally advisable, you actually have to pass at a supermajority, which would be 60% instead of 50%. So, and the reason that date got backed up so much, I've had people be surprised by that. There was legislative change, I think it was 2 years ago, I'm looking wrong, 2 years ago. So the MD gets 60 days to review it. And then there is a letter that comes back from the commissioner, and that has to be published 45 to 60 days before the election, which is a pretty tight timeline. So if you kind of said the Department of Ed took 60 days and you publish it kind of at the last possible second, that's how we back up to that date of submission. You actually don't have to call for an election until 78 days before the election date, which is a little bit convoluted. But many boards choose to set the election at the same time that they send the review and comment, but you don't technically have to. So that was a really long answer to your question.
Oh, it was excellent. Very helpful, and I appreciate all the details. Thank you so much.
Oh, okay.
Sal, John, thank you so much for being here. Our facilities meetings are super informative, as Dan said, and you're always offering us all the details that we need, so I really appreciate that. We'll make sure that they all get shared out in minutes. I have a question on a little bit further up as you're talking about prioritization and, as you're talking with our school leaders. When we're talking about, I think there was a term on there that's special topics. Does that include updates to other schools that might be happening as part of the referendum? Or what is a special topic?
Certainly could. Maybe let's think of a couple examples. I think there are some desired improvements at the transition center, right? Like there's a couple things that they would choose to do that long-term facilities maintenance doesn't really qualify for. The build out of the second floor of the early learning school it's growth adjacent, right? But it's a project that was master planned for without a funding source right now. There's discussion about your engagement with Lifetime for the pool, right? That's a topic. So again, so all of these have something to do with growth, but they're maybe not like need more classrooms. It's all of the parts to a well-functioning school system. There's been discussion about making improvements for SDC across more schools as that's been an ongoing pressure. So that's kind of growth, kind of not. What are some other examples?
I think you highlighted just kind
Those are kind of
those
the bigger
projects
ones, yeah.
that have been out there, and there's always going to be that additional those additional things that again aren't necessarily directly tied to capacity or growth, but are things that we have in other buildings or things that we would like to see in our buildings. So
I might just add to how school buildings are utilized today or than when they were built 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago, whatever the case might be. So we're finding that with those different utilizations, we're making some modifications within some of our schools for temporary basis or in response to the next year's need. And what we'd like to do along with this in a bigger scope is take a look at how do we position ourselves well so we have that built-in flexibility. Because as I said, buildings are constructed quite a lot differently today than they were several decades ago. So how can we retrofit existing buildings to bring some of those other features to our more experienced buildings than perhaps a new one that we might build or a new addition that we might build on. So those are some of the challenges that we're currently facing and seeking solutions for too.
Sal and John, thank you for the presentation. I have a question about involvement of the city because this is a tax for the voters, right? And this will be levied through property taxes, I'm assuming. So that is something that the city and the county will be involved in. Are they any part of this process? Are they in the task force somewhere? Or?
I would say there's options for them to be a part of the process, but it is not required. What I will say is that there's, my understanding is that there's a lot of engagement with cities and counties as your enrollment projections are put forth. They help provide census data and development data and things of that nature. So I would say maybe as a second tier, they're involved. And I have clients who choose to involve local agencies in their planning processes, absolutely. But it's not mandatory, to be clear.
Right, but are we planning on involving them at any the referendum is announced or?
I haven't heard of any plans yet, but we can have some further discussion.
So City of Medina, for example, or Three Rivers.
That's a good specific example. We have engaged some with the City of Medina as we talk about what it might take from an infrastructure perspective if you were to put more facilities on district-owned land. So there's things like that where we do have to engage with them because you're a developer in their community.
Right.
A little more on the technical side.
Okay.
Yeah.
But would they be a part of the task force?
Water available.
Would they be a part of the task force or somewhere else in this chart? Or
I might defer to. I don't know that I've heard any.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think we've necessarily engaged city government officials on task forces, but I could envision myself and or a couple of folks doing presentations at city council meetings this fall and to bring them into the loop. We have informal discussions. I meet with City of Plymouth, city administrator and his assistant, I don't know, several times during the course of the year, as does John and other team members have been doing that as well. So I think we have a really good collaborative working relationship with them, but and engage them as we feel it's necessary now with Medina. If we end up building new schools out in Medina, that'll be a new thing for them. And I believe, I don't think they have any public schools in Medina, not in our district certainly, but I've lost track of where all the scope is, but I don't think they have been through this process before, so that'll be a new experience for them. But
And anybody from Hennepin County, because property taxes are collected by them. So just wondering if any of them are involved in this. So I'm not saying they should be,
Yeah.
just a curiosity kind of thing.
We have engaged some with the county as we talk about potential development, but I don't think we've
Okay.
outlined if they'd be on the task force yet.
Okay. All right, thank you. I think that's all the questions we have. Thank you for coming and presenting this to us. We will have a copy of this, right?
Yes.
From Board Book?
Yes.
Yeah, okay,
and
thank
I
you.
just comment too that we're working with two great companies, so we appreciate the work that you do, and we've had great results with Wold and with KA. And John, not to make us sound old, but I did some quick math. I think you and I have worked together for about 25 years now on a lot of projects, not only for me in this district, but the one I worked in before. So we have a lot of history together, and they have incredibly competent folks in both organizations. So we appreciate you being here today and
Thank
helping us move this forward. So we look forward to the work.
It's exciting stuff.
Thank you for coming, yes, thank you. All right. We will now switch back to the second item on the agenda, if David, you're ready. It's the presentation of the fiscal year 2025-26 preliminary budget by Finance Director David Draskowicz. David, thank you.
I might just comment too, David, thank you so much for being here today. And I appreciate I think I know all of our board know this, but David has really stepped up in his role as Director of Finance and Operations during our search for a new Executive Director of Finance and Operations, whom we have now hired. Trevor Peterson will be joining us effective officially July 1st. But in the interim, while we've been working with him from afar, while he's wrapping up in his current district, David has really stepped up. And also, I want to comment on Jack Stearns here tonight as well. So not only these two, but the whole department have really helped cover us in the interim and have stepped up, taken on additional duties and assignments. And I guess that's the part of the job description that says other duties as assigned, right? That the last bullet is always what you want to read, the bullet point on a job description, because that's oftentimes what it is. And prior to that, also, I just want to acknowledge our new Executive Director of Human Resources, Dave Lutz, is here tonight. I don't know if all of you have met him officially. Somewhere along the way you have. Dave, welcome and thanks and congratulations and thanks for being here tonight, and best wishes to you as you launch into that. Dave's not new to the district. He's been here for longer than I have, maybe 20 years you've been here. We loaned him out for a few years down in Mankato, but then he came back, so we were happy to get him back in a principal role, and just appreciate the great work that you do. So thanks for being here tonight. And with that, I'll turn it over to David. You're on. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the intro. I appreciate it. So good evening, Superintendent Chase, board members. I've come to you today to present the 25-26 prelim budget. At first, I will start with a little background information, some assumptions and components that go into the creation of the budget. Then we'll hit on the overview of information of the prelim 25-26 budgets, which will follow general fund, food service, community ed, construction fund, and our debt service fund. And then we'll follow up with questions at the end. So on to the general fund. So before that, I guess I'll bring this slide up. Scott always used to like this. This is kind of the breakdown of all the fund balances, all the funds that live in school districts, such as, like I said, general fund, food service, community ed, building construction, and our debt service fund. A little refresher on the fund balances. There's a couple different fund balances within the district on the general fund and also community ed and food service. They are restricted, which houses our operating capital, capital levy, capital projects levy, and long-term facility maintenance. There's assigned, which is separations and / retirement, QComp, site carryover, non-spendables, which is prepaids and inventory the district holds, and then the unassigned, which is the most our public is concerned with. Just a slide to show you where we're at in the whole budget process. We're bringing June 2025, the prelim budget for approval. And now on to the prelim general fund budget key assumptions. So just a quick breakdown again. The sources of revenue for the 25-26 budget, for the revenue budget, is 60% of that is state aids, 2.74% increase for 25-26. We're looking at property taxes, which are increasing by 4% for next fiscal year. Federal sources, we increased at 0%, based with the federal not knowing what they're doing right now, and maybe some reductions. We kept it at this. You'll see later on, I'll talk about the federal revenue sources. And then we did a slight 2% increase on all other funding sources, which would be athletic fees, our LEO services and community ed, our food service sales of a la carte, and then also our student activities accounts. So key assumptions for the formula allowance kind of brings it back around again. For the 25-26, we're seeing 2.74% on the general education formula, which then makes it out to be $7,481. This is a $200 increase from previous fiscal year. Revenue projection information. So this is the big one. So enrollment increases for 25-26. We're using an enrollment of 13,186 for 25-26. This is up from our revised budget of 12,076 for FY 24-25, and this is an increase of 426 kids. The formula allowance, which makes up general education aid, is 60% of our revenue. So 2.74% for 25-26, which is up from 2% for 24-25, which is an increase to 7,481 again, $200 increase. Levy is up 4%. Our special education cross-subsidy, federal to pay tuition bills, our cross-subsidy aid is around 70% of the funds we spend on special ed, which is a one-year lag. So what we spend in this fiscal year, 25, will be paid to us in 26, which would be roughly 75% of those expenditures, with transportation for next year getting covered at 95%. We utilized $1.5 million of federal funds to pay for special education bills. This allowed us to use the federal funds of $1.5 million to buy down our tuition bills, which then we put those expenditures that would have lived in the federal expenditures into state funding, which allows us to tuition bill, so it actually increases our revenue that we're seeing for next fiscal years. And we started that in 23-24. Federal allocations in COVID-related dollars, forecasting similar revenues of current year, and also COVID-related dollars came to an end April 30th, 2024, sorry. Key assumptions. Enrollment is a key driver in our revenue. We've had our original assumptions. Our demographer did a study in 2024. We had high migration, low kindergarten. This assumption was based by TeamWorks, Reinhardt Hazelden. Also, Jen Wilk has done our own, along with Ehlers. So we've had 4 different models to project this enrollment just to make sure we are on par with our growing enrollment that we are seeing. Just want to let you know, if we scroll down to the bottom, this 426 kid enrollment growth for 25-26 will increase our revenue by $3.1 million. If you look at it as a levy.
David, I think we're behind one slide.
Oops, sorry. There we go. Sorry, my bad. Clicking and looking. So if you look to the bottom, our actual generated allowance is the 7,481. Our increase in students is 426. This will generate $3.1 million for next year. This is because of new enrollment. Now, if you take the levy allowance into it, it's roughly around $10,000 with the increase in student. We're looking at $4.2 million for next fiscal year. This is just a kind of a recap of what we have already talked about, with state aids going up to 2.74 from 2% prior fiscal year. Levies 4% up from 3.8. Other, we're staying the same, increasing that at 2%, and then federal staying the same at 0%. All right, onto the expenditure projection information. So we start with salary and benefits. This is a big one for the district. Salary and benefits make roughly around 71% of the total cost for the district in the general fund. We are currently negotiating multiple groups, which includes the teacher union, WEA, and also the unaffiliated group for next fiscal year. Our health insurance, we're seeing an increase of 7% for next fiscal year for 25-26, along with 2% on dental. Transportation, we're seeing a budget of increase of 6% for 25-26. And also budget overall increase of 2% on our utilities. Jack Stearns in 23-24 and the prelim and revised it at 10 historical year process of the utilities, and we increased that budget. So now we're at a point where we can just slowly increase it and see where it lies with the new increases as utilities move on. Special education is increased is 10% due to projected needs and increase in expected future, with shifting the $1.5 million from federal into state. Allows the district to bill tuition at a higher rate, which I said earlier, which allows for additional revenue for the district. Technology increases expenditures just to offset that tech levy increase in revenue. Budget assumptions and expenditures. We build those based on this board, what they set parameters on, and once those negotiating groups are done, when they're in negotiations, we take a conservative estimate on those salaries and benefits as we move forward for the projected budget for 25-26. As I said earlier, health insurance is up to 7%, which was an increase in 7% in the prior fiscal year as well. Dental, prior fiscal year was 5%, so we're seeing a slight decrease, but still an increase at 2% for next fiscal year. TRA rate, that is increasing considerably from 8.75% to 9.81% for the next fiscal year. Para stays the same at 7.5%. Supplies, we increased 3% in 24-25, and now supplies are going up 2% for the next fiscal year. Fuel and utilities, as I talked to earlier, we did the 10-year historical data study in 23-24, and then 24-25 saw a 6% increase. We're doing an estimated 2% as prior next fiscal year. And transportation is seeing the same as it was prior, 6% increase. As I said earlier, here's a breakdown of kind of the general fund of what the expenditures kind of make up as the group. 52% salaries, 19% is benefits, 16% is purchase services, 9% is capital purchases, 3% supply and materials, and 1% is other. I wanted to bring this slide. This is the LTFM. I think this will probably be the last fiscal year of this slide. We just want to bring it to you because of the adjustment that we're seeing from 22-23. We are seeing an $8.8 million adjustment. LTFM has its own restricted fund balance. It's still due to the COVID pandemic when we couldn't get our supplies and purchase services. So we were able to spend only as much as we could for that levy year. And now we're seeing 2-year fiscal year prior adjustments. So we'll see for 25-26 an $8.8 million adjustment, which will look different in the budget, and I'll show you that later on, but it really lives in its own restricted fund balance, so it doesn't affect anything in the unassigned fund balance. Cross-subsidy aid, just a quick overcap of that. Cross-subsidy increase, it began in 2020. They increased it from 44% and started to 50%, or 44% in 26, and it'll go to 50% in 27. I had some notes. I sat down at a meeting in the future fiscal years. There's a $250 million cost reduction in special education that the legislation needs to cap, and they need to look at everything in special education. And if they can't hit that goal, they're going to reduce the cross-subsidy aid, so they will take that back in the future fiscal year if they can't meet those reductions. So the district, though it got it now, could see in the future a reduction. All right, now to the preliminary general fund budget. All right, this is the big one. So local property taxes, we're seeing that 4% increase to $75,487,102. Our state aids are going up $7 million, which is 5%, 5.919% to $144,237,049. I wanted to bring back, so if you went back to the previous slide thinking about it, our student enrollment, that increase was 3.1. So of that $7 million, 3.1 of that is our student enrollment. So if you cut that, now we're only going up roughly by $4 million. So when we talk about student enrollment, it really is a big thing on a district that we grow in the future. It allows us to move forward and make changes and add staff. The additional adds is special education. That's an increase in revenue, along with the additional 0.74% on top of the new aid that we're getting for students. Federal aid is going down just by 243,000. This is an assumption that we're going to lose a little bit, 6% based on what the federal aid was giving us. We will see this number will increase in the revised once the fiscal year's audit is complete and what carry forward dollars we have. So we will adjust this in revised, and I'm sure it will go up a bit. Local revenues are seeing an increase of 592,000 to 7.1 million. That is your athletics, your student activities, your donations, your miscellaneous revenue sources, rentals. That is what lives in that funding source. On to expenditures. It is going, so salary and benefits are going up 8.62% to $171,112,36. This is due to increase in staffing due to increased enrollment. So that is that. And then also the steps and lanes and the contract negotiations that we're seeing. Purchase services is only going up 0.68%. Supplies and materials, you may pick this one out. It's going down by 1.2 million. You may question that one, but it is, we had for 24-25, we had a considerable project in safe schools that Wade oversaw for updating our cameras at the middle schools and the high schools. So we did with that infrastructure and cameras to keep our schools safe. So that was an additional $1 million. So we won't have that next year. So that is why that's decreasing. So that's decreasing to 21,221,927. Miscellaneous revenue sources decreasing by 635,000 to 1.1 million. So when you look at it, total picture with this includes LTFM in it, we're projected expenditures over revenue by $5,574,035. And like I said, I have to talk to this one. This is LTFM lives in this. So the next slide will pull LTFM out since it has its own restricted fund balance, and you'll see kind of where we're going to lie for the unassigned fund balance. So the next slide, this is just a recap, same slide, but just now LTFM is pulled out of this. So when you look at it, we're revenue over expenditures. We'll add roughly about $2.93 million to our unassigned fund balance for next fiscal year. So I'm excited about that. It's always nice to project revenue over expense. On to the next one, Wayzata Cafes and Community Ed. This is our Wayzata Cafes is definitely projected by student enrollment and increases based on that since we do get state aid revenue from that. Wayzata Cafes, a little history, we have seen different funding sources of that in previous fiscal years. Once we were all student sales, then we were federal revenue during the pandemic, and then now we're seeing state aids. For the last 2 fiscal years, we've been receiving that in reimbursement rates. So meal sales are going up 44,930, and that will make it meal sales 1.5 million. Our federal aid is going up 68,000, increasing our prelim budget to 2.6 million. And then our state aid is going up additional 208,000, and that's going to increase our state aid to 6.1 million, and that is due to the student increases. On to expenditures with the student increases, we also have to increase staffing just to make sure we're meeting that expectation and how much we serve. As Chase always says, we're kind of the biggest restaurant in Minnesota, at least in our area. So that salary and benefits are increasing by 319,000, which increases salary benefit expenditures to 4.3 million. Our food is increasing by 207,000. This is due to increased enrollment and also inflation in the food costs. And that will predict food to almost 4.8 million for next fiscal year. Miscellaneous and other, you may pick this one out. It is increasing by 1.1 million. This is Michelle's covering some of the freezer costs at the high school. So she's taking that on. Since we have such a wonderful food service fund balance, we can spend some of that funds on that. And so that will allow Michelle to house more food at the high school, allow for better serving for the students, and also the increased volume that we're serving at the high school. So that's fantastic that we have the opportunity to do that. So right there, we're projected revenue expenditures over revenue of 1.2 million. And like I said, that is all to pretty much the majority of Michelle putting that new upgraded freezer at the Wayzata High School. Fund 4, this is our community ed, which is pretty much all fee-based It does get some levy and state aids, so I'll break into that. Our local property taxes are increasing by 92,000, and that puts it to 2.1 million for next fiscal year. State aids are increasing by 227,000. That puts next fiscal 25-26 at 1.9 million. And then where we see the majority of our increase in revenue is just because it is a fee-based program. 1.16 increases the fee-based revenues, and that puts that revenue at 12.8 million for next fiscal year. With that, the increased, student count, the increased volume that we're serving in our community ed, we also have to see that in salary and benefits. We start seeing a slight increase there. And the nice thing is our Fund 4 has a wonderful fund balance. And so it is great that Jenny Ebert is keeping par and keeping up to date on that. So our salary and benefits increased by 1.3 million, and that boosts 25-26 to 13.2 million or 13.4 million for salary and benefits. Purchase services, supplies, and education materials increased by 276,000. That's 3.3 million in that for next fiscal year. Capital and technology is reduced by 78,000. There's just some expenditures that she doesn't need to do in our operating capital and our object codes 5 through the 500s. Dues and memberships only increased by 1,000. So that puts, again, she's projected revenue over expense as she has done in every fiscal year so far that I've been here of 117,000. She's doing a wonderful job with that program. She gave me some talking points on here because I'm not 100% in community ed, so I asked her if she would give me a little bit. And so she just has some talking points. We consistently seen 5 to 8% annual growth over the last 4 years, projected that continue to grow for the demand of services are community ed. Our community ed's programs are service oriented, so when programs expand, that means more costs that are contracted services. Supplies 26 budget reflects increases in revenues and increase in related expenditures. Programs seeing the largest growth are our Wayzata Kids program or childcare program and youth classes in camps. On to debt service and our Fund 6 construction. So pretty much for Wayzata Public Schools, our construction fund is made up of our abatement bonds that were issued in 2019. We are using most of that, the majority of that in June, and then also we'll finish up those projects in July and August. So as of 24-25, we saw our budget for other revenue sources was 291,000. For next fiscal year, we will not have any revenue sources as of now because those funds have been moved over to Ellers to earn a zero interest since we don't want to hit arbitrage on those funds. So they will earn 0% interest. It will just give us enough time to spend those down as we move forward. When we do sell the 2025 A bonds, we will bring a revised for the construction since we're doing that project at West Middle School, and we'll revise this amount and we'll revise the interest earned on it along with the expenditures. So the expenditures are decreasing for next fiscal year since we're spending the majority of it in this fiscal year. So we'll see expenditures in purchase services of 250,000 next year, and also capital 1.5 million for a total of 1.8 million in costs for next fiscal year. So this is projected expenditures over revenue, but we already have the funds sitting in a restricted fund balance, and so we're just looking to spend those remaining amounts down. All right, on to Fund 7, which is it houses the district's outstanding bonded indebtedness. So for next fiscal year, we're looking at a local property tax increase of 984,000, which boosts that revenue to 18.7 million. Sale of bonds, we have nothing right now. We do plan to sell some in July, which we'll update this later on. State aids, we do get very minimal state aids. It is the agriculture homestead market value credit and school building bond credit. It makes up roughly $9,000 of it, and that is very hard to predict whether or not it's going to go up or down. It's very little, which puts our revenues for Fund 7 at 18.7 million. Now, when you move down to expenditures, you will see our bond principal increases considerably by 1.3 million, almost 1.4. This is because as we move over time, we're paying less on the interest and paying more on the principal of the bond, as you would with your mortgage. So that boosts next 25-26 prelim budget to 13.6 million. Bond interest, you're going to see a reduction in that since we're paying less interest as we move on. We pay more times on this bond. That boosts the prelim budget to 4.7, almost 4.8 million, with bank fees still staying at 2,900. This puts the total expenditure package at 18.4 million, which still gives us 314,000 that will sit in a restricted fund balance. We are able to levy 105% of our debt service, so you'll always kind of see that with some adjustments moving in the future. Preliminary 25-26 budgets, all funds. So this is the all funds combined. I'm not going to go into in detail because we've kind of gone through them in the past, but I will say when you look at the top, our total revenue of all funds is $277,672,519. Our expenditures of all funds is $2,085,922,566. We're seeing expenditures over revenue of 8.2 million, but you also have to take in, you may think of this and look, oh, we're spending more than we're getting. Well, now you need to remember that there's LTFM, that adjustment of 8.81 million in there. We've also increased some revenues. We've increased some expenditures. We're also that abatement bonds, which we're not giving revenue on, is a negative 1.8 million. That's sitting in there. And then also the food service is in there too. So when you break it down, it looks easier to see. When you put it as a whole together, it's harder to see that number. So that's what I want to go to over than that. So continued planning and monitoring. So we just want to make sure that we're looking at our enrollment as we move forward. That's the biggest thing. We want to make sure those students are coming and that we're hiring the staff we need as they come. That's the biggest thing. I think that's kind of what we saw during the pre-pandemic. We were hiring staff just before the kids come, and then it kind of put us in a sticky situation. But the state said they would also make us whole. As Scott would always say, we kept our staff. We were loyal to our staff. Adding back expenditures, closely monitoring student enrollment, which I touched on. We also want to make sure we continue looking at the changes in the pupil formula allowance from the state, making sure we stay up on the legislative changes. As I was talking to earlier, we might see that cross-subsidy aid be reduced if they can't hit that $250 million in cuts in special education. Their last option was that cross-subsidy reduction aid. And also current and future negotiations with staff. We need to watch what we're negotiating, make sure that we, follow with what our budget can afford at the time. And then I'll leave it up to questions.
All right. Thank you, David. A lot of information there. Thank you. Yes, Jason.
If I may, I'll just add a couple things. First of all, thank you so much for the great presentation. I appreciate the thoroughness of it. I just wanted to comment on something that you shared just a few minutes ago about the state making us whole after COVID. And that didn't really ever happen in regard to making up for the lost momentum that we had. And we've been in the throes of making a recovery from that, the last 5 years really from that time. So, and I'm not saying the state necessarily had the means to do that, but that was what our hope always was. But it didn't really ever get fully reconciled back to where we were able to make up for lost revenues during that time. I appreciated that you commented on the monitoring the enrollment. As we all know, we just went through some projection analysis and we're looking at multiple models for that. It's 400 plus students is a pretty robust prediction. So we're, cautiously taking a look at the growth. I think if Jen Welk were here, she would say we're adding about 20 kids a week. Mm-hmm. However, there'll be some that'll exit as well. So sometimes we don't know that till late August. So we are monitoring that, and our HR department's been working closely with finance in regard to hiring in a methodical way to make sure that we don't end up with more staff than we have students when the school year starts. David referenced the 2.74% increase on the formula. There's actually a few things that chip away from that. Again, these may be things that you have questions on, but I just think it's important to maybe hit a few of those highlights. So even though the formula goes up by 2.74%, David mentioned that reimbursements for special ed transportation are going to go down 5%. So they'll pay prior they paid 100% of whatever our costs were, if I'm remembering correctly, and that'll go down to 95% and then 90 in year 2.
Yep, so that is correct. So next fiscal year 25-26, as Chase said, it'll be 90%. We'll get some of back because it'll go on the cross subsidy aid, which they talked about reducing. So
Yeah.
I mean, take it with a grain of salt. And then 90% in 26-27. And I can keep going if you want to keep going on the.
Yeah, I just had a few other things.
Okay, keep
and I'm sure other folks, they'll have some questions too. There were also some student support dollars that were allocated. There was a 3-year plan. I only know the rough numbers. I think in year 1, we were going to get about 150 million. Year 2, maybe 400 million. I think year 3, 700 million or so. And what they did is they capped it in the year 2 amount. So we're not going to get that next bump, which we didn't find out until whenever the session ended, early June. Well, we hire in February and March. So we already spent on hiring counselors, anticipating those dollars would be there. So I think, I don't know, that might have been a $250,000 to $300,000 reduction that comes from the general fund. So those are some of the things that are kind of challenging. The increases to the district responsibility for TRA contributions. There's no additional new funding to support that, correct?
There is no, but we do get some state aid for our TRA contribution. So it does come through state aid. So that's helpful there.
So is that part of the 2.74? Or is that
No, that's always been there since I've been in school finance.
And then you all heard me talk about the challenging business model that we have. So you saw some increases, for example, transportation 6%, health insurance premium 7%, and even with an increase to the formula of 2.74%, which compared to other years, in my experiences, we've had 0%, we've had 1%, we've had 2%. We've even had probably a 1.5 thrown in there somewhere along the way. So 2.74 looks good. Some of it gets chipped away, though, with some of these things that didn't get talked a lot about. And I just wanted to highlight that we're needing to accommodate that on anticipated additional revenue that now we won't get. And it'll have a net impact on the bottom line when the audit's done for fiscal year 26. It'll have a bit of an impact. I also just wanted to comment on the food service program, and you commented both for that and for community ed. Up until this year, or maybe 2 years ago, whenever the state started providing or having districts provide no-cost lunches to students, not free. I don't refer to it as free lunch. The state is paying that with dollars that could have been allocated in different ways, but they chose to allocate it that way. A concern we had at the time was that the reimbursements will go down. That's going to happen, I think.
Yep.
As we had kind of predicted, that the reimbursement rates coming back to districts per meal are going to go down. Maybe someone else will have a question that I don't know the specific amount, but
I believe they're going, what are they, Jack? 12 and a half cents, and they're going down to 6.25 in 27, 28. So they're getting cut in half.
What's the unit per what?
Per lunch served, is that what it? Yeah, for the free and reduced. So
I mean, just the state payment toward the no-cost lunches for students, isn't the total going down for that?
Yeah, the total is going down too.
So anyway, that'll just be something that we'll monitor. We referenced the fact that we have a fund balance, but that'll just be something to look at. Today we do, but we'll see how that impacts over time. And then just one final comment. Sorry, I'm taking so much time. These are things that came to mind as I was listening. I just wanted to reinforce. You commented about the community ed program and the fund balance and the nice rebound that they made. Food service made a nice rebound as well. Something that I just like to reinforce, that both with the community ed budget and with the food service budget, in the event that they go into, a deficit, the general, they have to make a 2-year plan or something, I think, with community ed to pull out of it and get whole again. Probably the same for food service. If that doesn't happen, then the general fund subsidizes that. So one nice thing with community ed is they have a different business model than us. They can establish their fee rates according to what they anticipate their expenditures to be. Prior to when the state took over the food reimbursements, food service could do that. so they could actually control the revenues they needed in order to pay the expenditures. And when I refer to the business model that we operate in, we really have very little control over our revenues. And that's always been a challenge. We only control the expenditures and take kind of what we get from the state in regard to increases to the funding. So anyway, those are the points that I just wanted to highlight. Again, great job, David. I appreciate the work that you and Jack and everybody else did to put this together. It was a really great overview.
Yeah, I couldn't have done it without my finance team. So
Thank you.
it takes more than just one individual to do it.
Thank you, David. Yeah, Paras, you have a question?
So first, I'll echo Chase's comments. I mean, you, Jack, Jen, working with you all in finance committee has been really great experience. I mean, you picked it up. There was no difference in experience, if you will. You were always prepared. You had all the data points. I know there are a lot of numbers that were thrown here, but we've seen that sort of iteration in finance meetings, how meticulous you guys are with numbers, with assumptions, with data points. So again, thank you for all your help and support. The only question I have is, and I'll call it our reserves. Would you anticipate still on the higher end of 8% or plus, or would we sort of slide towards, 6%? Typically, we try to keep it between 6 to 8%, but usually we are on the higher end of it. So any anticipation?
For our fund balance?
Fund balance, yeah.
Unassigned fund balance, I think we're projected. So last fiscal year when we ended out, it was 8.31%. With this budget, based on the 24-25 budget, we're looking roughly around 9.
Okay.
I mean, we'll have true numbers once the
Sure,
audit's
sure.
complete. If I can give you an estimate, I would probably give you still a conservative estimate, and I
No,
feel like
that's
that would be a conservative one.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. That's really
I might just add on to that too, in response, it's also going to be important for the board as we move forward to consider what we've been hearing, and it's hard to project this 2 years out, but the next biennium, there's a projection of a $6 billion shortfall in the state, so that could have an impact along the way, and if the fund balance is a little bit higher than what we've had before, that might look really good in a couple of years if that materializes.
All right. Thanks.
Go ahead. Oh, Dan? Okay.
Well, thank you so much. It was very rewarding to sit in on Finance Committee last week and really go over the numbers and receive your excellent presentation. I don't have any questions except to say I really appreciate the work you and your team getting together to put forward this really excellent piece of information. I'm heartened by the news. It looks like our financial outlook is strong, but you guys are going to be cautious along the way, and that's appreciated as well. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. I think I have to include one other person is Dave Lutz. I work closely when I'm building salary and benefits. We pretty much work hand in hand. So I think I'd like to include Dave in kind of this whole thing. So thanks, Dave.
Hi, thank you for being here.
Yeah.
It was a great explanation of everything, good overview. I am concerned about special ed funding. So help me understand, if the state is not able to find $250 million, then we're going to continue to see cuts because we will no longer have a cross-subsidy aid, or that'll get reduced. Is that a correct understanding? It'll get reduced.
Yep.
Okay. So we would never reduce our level of support and our level of service to our students. So then the cross-subsidy for us will again increase. Is that a correct understanding?
So what they're doing, so the $250 million in cuts is they're looking outside of districts. They're trying to find that where they can reduce the $250 million without affecting districts. But if they can't, then they'll reduce the cross subsidy, which we're boost up to from 44 to 50%, which then means the district would get less funding based on the spend. Which is very concerning when you look at it with what districts spend on special ed. I mean, it would put every district in a very hardship as we move forward.
Okay, another question I have is, as we think about transportation, the special ed transportation used to be funded 100%. We are now at 95%, and it will continue to go down another 5% from what I understand. Okay. In comparison to general ed students, how much is transportation covered?
So nothing for general education students, it's not covered.
Okay.
So, I mean, other than your non-public education transportation and some DSEG transportation, you don't get funding on your regular ed transportation.
So the way that we do transportation in Wayzata is through the general fund. We just take care of
Yes.
that. Okay, thank you.
I'm going to keep in this line of questioning. And so my question, and so first, thank you to the team, right? This is amazing, and I'll say that again, but I just do really appreciate the thoughtfulness that goes into it. I'm going to ask about, we talked about the 2.9 million that might go into the unassigned fund balance, and some of this was alluded to. But I'm wondering if we look at what's on the horizon, which has been talked about, we have some unknowns. We have some enrollment unknowns. We haven't seen our students yet. We have negotiations that are happening right now. There's a number of questions around the federal government and what they're able to provide for or not. We have some of the special education questions that Heidi just alluded to. I think we have a transportation contract that we're going to have to negotiate at some time. And so all of those things, right, could it end up that we could not only blow through that 2.9 million in fund balance, but then also need to take from the fund balance that we already have. And that's not just sort of being a doomsday naysayer, but these are sort of real credible threats, or not threats, but just factors that are going into our budget adjustment. Is that true?
That is true. Yeah, I mean, you're right on. These factors could push us over. We won't increase our revenues, but yeah, it could increase our expenditures where now we're spending in a deficit. I mean, I'd like to say I budgeted conservatively, just for those, and hopefully, they'll come in less. But as you said, we don't know what the future holds, so it could. I mean, we could spend in a deficit when we come to revise. So.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And those are just the things that are on our horizon, and we know that we have some things coming up. Okay. So thank you for that clarification. And I just want to underscore a thank you to and Dr. Anderson referenced this a little bit. I remember when that beautiful Wayzata Cafe's fund balance was in a deficit. And I remember when we were talking about bailing out community ed and other things. And that was 4 years ago, right? I mean, that was, so that wasn't a long time ago. And where we are is because each of you have worked with those leaders, and we have amazing leaders in community ed and Wayzata Cafes that have just been really thoughtful and conservative in what they're doing, which has allowed them to regrow up. And so I just want to underscore the importance and say a huge thank you for conservative and proactive budgeting and the way that this team leads, including Dr. Anderson leads our district and facilities with Mr. Deutsch in the back as well. So thank you, everyone, in the work that you're doing.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, David, most of the questions that I had in my mind were answered when my colleagues asked you those questions. I do have one question. If we go back to I don't know which slide number it is, we have a breakdown of the taxes, state tax, the part of the taxes that we get for our funding, 60% state, 30%.
Oh, yeah.
City
Let me go back.
property. Oh,
There you go.
So the 4% increase for the property taxes before adjustments, what are the adjustments we are looking at? What are you talking about?
The adjustments are kind of like the LTFM. We get adjustments for previous fiscal years, whether or not. So our levy is based on projected enrollment. So we go into a system and we input what we think our projected enrollment is going to be. And the levy kicks in money for that. So it's based on our projected enrollment, starts paying us. While 2 fiscal years go on, once the true enrollment is adjusted, then we start getting those adjustments, whether they be positive increases in revenue or negative, such as like the LTFM. We didn't spend enough, so now we're seeing those in 2 fiscal years later on.
All right, sounds good. Thank you. If there are no other questions, thank you, David. Thank you, Jack, and thank you, John, and thank you, Jen. She's not here, but still, thank you, all of you. So. All right. We do have a special regular meeting following this work session, and the board will be asked to approve the prelim budget. Is that right, David? The board will be asked to approve that budget, right, after in the special work session. All right, so there are no school board reports, and this completes our work session for the evening. We will take a short break of 10 minutes and reconvene for the special regular meeting. The time is now 5:55. The Wayzata Public Schools Board of Education work session for Monday, June 23rd, 2025 is adjourned.